Great. So welcome again. We are so glad that you're here. Um, we've got a lot of great information to share with all of you. So we're going to go ahead and launch in. Now, this is for CalTPA. We're going to host the EdSped CalTPA Winter Coordinator meeting this Thursday. So today's meeting, we will just be covering CalTPA. All right, let's go ahead and move on and show and talk about all of the different CalTPAs and EdSped CalTPAs and APAs that we offer, just so we're all clear and recognize those color-coded logos. So for CalTPA, that is green. That is for single subject, world language, as well as multiple subjects. In purple, we have our PK3 CalTPA. And in orange, we have our Ed Specialist CalTPA. Those are all 5 credential areas: mild, moderate support needs, extensive support needs, early childhood special education, deaf, hard of hearing, and visual impairments. Did I get all 5? I think I got all 5. And then for CalAPA, for administrators, that is the only performance assessment for California administrators. All right, so let's get started on CalTPA information. A little bit of quick housekeeping first. Want to go over our agenda for today. We will do some introductions. We will take attendance and learn who's in the room today with us. We'll go over our norms and our outcomes for this meeting. We have lots of materials and resources to share with you. We'll put a Google link in the chat in just a few minutes when we get to that slide. We have Dr. Xavier Webb here from Evaluation Systems, and he will be going over some fall data, which is very interesting. You will get a kick out of this information. And then Marissa and I are going to kind of break that information down. We'll talk about an analysis of that data. We also have some upcoming feedback that we would like to receive from the field. Now, we have a survey that was posted in the EQ branch e-news. It goes out every Friday, but we will also share it in the Google folder with you. So we are going to start very soon making revisions on this version 1. So we're seeking that version 2 feedback from you. And so we'll encourage all of you, please, to give us some feedback on your experience with version 1 so that as we launch into our spring revisions, we really hear you, and we really want to hear what you have to say about your experience with version 1. So we have that feedback with that link to share. And then finally, we'll close out with some announcements and some save the date items to keep in mind. Okay, let's move on to introductions. We want to tell you who we are. We'll start with CTC team for performance assessment. Our director is Juliet Wallleitner. She is the director of the Division of Research, Data, and Assessment. We call it DREA for short. So we are part of the DREA division. My name is Julie Holmes. I'm one of the consultants on the performance assessment team. I am mainly supporting with the math cycle as well as cycle 1 across CalTPA and Ed Specialist CalTPA. And I'll pass it over to our newest member of our team, Patricia Lane, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia Lane, and I'm the newest consultant here on the team. And I'm happy to be here with all of you. And I hope we have a great session today. Miss Marissa or Dr. Marissa?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Marissa Luna Lopez, another consultant here on the performance assessment development team, supporting Cal TPA, EdSped, Cal TPA literacy performance assessment and cycle 2, as well as Cal APA. Back to you, Julie.
All right, and from our evaluation systems team of Pearson, we have Xavier Webb. Do you want to go ahead and introduce your team?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xavier Webb, Senior Area Director with the Pearson Group, and Dr. Reginald Nichols and Ilse could not join us today, but I'll be taking you through the data. See a lot of familiar faces. Glad that you're able to join us today. I work very closely with Julie, Marissa, and Patricia on implementing the performance assessments and a lot of other fun things, but glad to be here with you today and excited to share the data and information with you.
Thank you. All right, so let's see who's in the room. So please, let's test out the chat feature. If you could go to the next slide, Xavier. Go ahead and type in your name, your position, your institution. And thank you, Gia, for letting us know about the survey link. We'll talk about that. We'll look into that. So go ahead and put your name in the chat. Great. All right, while you are all doing that, let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about our norms because we want to get to the good stuff today. So our norms for this meeting, as always, we just ask that you keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. It's helpful, please, if you have your camera on, but we do understand if you need to have it off. We do use the chat feature a lot. You can use it to post questions that are related to today's topic. At the end, if you have a specific question, once we are done with the webinar, we can always answer a more specific topic, or you can email us if it's maybe a longer question. Again, post questions of a general focus. For this session, we want to stay on topic, so nothing program or candidate specific right now. We ask that you avoid multitasking during this webinar. We'd want you to hear all of this information, and we've got some key data to go over. And just honor time for all the participants by moderating your participation. Share the air. We'll let others have a chance to speak as well. So those are our norms and our outcomes for today. Our hope is to really build and maintain this CalTPA learning community and partnerships. We are a partnership for all of you. We want to be a support for you. We want you to understand deeply this assessment so that you can answer those questions for your faculty, if you're candidate facing with candidates. So we really want to keep and build this community. We will analyze version 1 data, and we are doing that so that you can improve maybe your program design, you can improve your level of candidate support and implementation. So we will go over lots of great data today. We'll talk about the survey for feedback for version 2 towards the end. And then we're going to look ahead at all the upcoming events and support events that we offer that might impact how you implement the CalTPA, or if supports that you might need to better implement the CalTPA within your program, and just performance assessment in general. And let's go over materials. All right, so we've got a Google folder. We will put that link in the chat so that everyone can access it. Thank you. So within this Google folder, go ahead and click it open. Make sure you can open it and maybe bookmark it as well. We've got our most up-to-date list of program coordinators that's in our ADS system. So it is helpful, and that this was downloaded this morning. So this is current information that we have in our system. So you know what we know. This is our list of program coordinators. If it does need to be updated, if you look at your institution and you see an incorrect name, that person's left, or you need to add someone else, or even worse, if it says not provided, we don't have anyone on file for your program. So please look at that list, make sure your name is on it and anyone else that you think should be on that list. To update this program list, we have the ADS user guide and overview in there. So that walks you through how to update your ADS system so that you can add additional people. We also downloaded this year's program guide. It's a mega guide. So you do need to download it and maybe use the Control F feature if you're looking for specific things. But the program guide covers all of our credential areas, except for the CalAPA. So it does cover all of the CalTPA and all of the Ed Specialist CalTPAs that we offer. As a reminder, we uploaded the required and acceptable supports. We also uploaded a link to the survey. And I know that Gia mentioned in the chat earlier that she tried to access it through the EQ e-news on Friday and she had trouble opening it. So perhaps this will work better. And in Friday's edition of the EQ branch e-news, we can look into that and make sure that that link is working. I'm seeing in the chat, if we're not on the coordinator list, how do we add yourself? So you would click on that ADS user guide that's in the resource folder and look through that. It'll walk you through how to update that information. There is an email we have towards the end of our presentation on the ADS system. I believe it's annualdatasystem@caltpa.ctc.gov that you can reach out for support with ADS. Don't quote me on that, but when we get towards the end, we also do have that ADS information. As a reminder, we have the Results Analyzer Navigation Guide. And at the end of today's presentation, we will put this slide deck in there as well for your reference. We like to hold off until the end of the presentation because you never know if we made an error. So we want to make sure sometimes we catch something and we need to add or edit a slide before we officially put it in the folder. So we just ask that just hold off within an hour or two after we close out today. We'll add it to the folder for you, but you all have access to the folder. And with that housekeeping, we are ready to move into our fall data. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Xavier Webb to go over that information.
Thank you, Julie. For the fall data review, just wanted to note the dates that we pulled this data from. So this is August 1st of 25 through December 11th of 25. So just kind of getting a snapshot from these roughly past 4 months. And jumping right in here, I will be looking first at the MPA Cycle 1 data. And here you're able to see our submissions. So we wanted to include both the version 7. So just think of this as being the old or previous version. It is still active for a little while. So we wanted to give you the counts for that and updates on the submissions, but then also give some information around the submissions that we've received to date, or within this that date period I mentioned from the August through December 11th for the new version 1s. So as you can see, our end counts here for single subject, world language, and multiple subject are posted here. And obviously they are smaller than what we're seeing for the version 1. So most candidates are migrating over to that version 1 and are now taking that. So just wanted to note the submissions, the counts for the submissions that we've received so far. And then focus specifically on the version 1 data. So here you'll see for our version 1 data to date, or again, sorry, I keep saying to date, but I mean from August 1st through December 11th. The pass rates that are here, we see for a single subject, 98%, world language, 100%, multiple subject, 98%, and PK3, 100%. So rather awesome, basically 98 to 100% passage rate across all their credentials is excellent to see. And I'll just note that this is on the first attempt. Again, I think this is a testament to the revisions and all the efforts that have gone into updating to the new CalTPA version 1. We've got a lot of great feedback about it, just things being clear, just much more easy to access and streamlined. So it's great that that's reflected in the pass rates that we're seeing currently. Next, we're going to take a look at the version 1 MPA Cycle 1. When I say Cycle 1, I'm referring to the single subject because there's not a MPA version for single subject. But we're going to look at the mean rubric scores here. And a couple things just to kind of note on here. You'll see these green and red boxes. And I add these on here just to note the highest rubric mean score for a given credential and then their lowest rubric mean score, just where you can kind of eyeball real quickly, you know, where candidates doing or performing the strongest. So this rubric 1.1 and 1.6, and then where they maybe not doing as well as across here is the 2.8s that we see for rubrics 1.3 and 1.4. So it's just kind of a way to take a look at this. And then sometimes it works out well that we'll see a lot of like the red boxes all go across the credentials, which would tell us that where one group is struggling, all groups are struggling. And similarly, when we see all the green boxes together, it gives us an idea of where all candidates are doing well. A little bit less of that, so there's kind of a mixed bag here, but I just wanted to note just kind of what is the red, what's the green, what are you seeing here? And then also to note that when I say candidates are doing well, the target is for them to perform at a level 3 on the rubric. So the level 3 performance reflects the target performance of a candidate relative to the TPEs that are measured in these rubrics. So basically, just think of it as we want to be seeing threes. Anything below a 3 is not quite where we want to be. Everything above a 3 is showing that they're doing quite well. So with all those kind of notes in mind, we see that if we're looking for some areas of strength across all credentials, we see that single subject world language and PK3, that we're having pretty strong performance. So all threes are above, so strong 3.5s, 3.6, 3.1, 2 3.3s, and kind of leaving MS out of that grouping. While this is the highest rubric for MS, it's not meeting that performance, that target level of a 3. But we can kind of just extrapolate from here that the strength that we're seeing is largely, if you're looking at cross credentials, specific single subject world language PK3, this rubric's 1.1 and 1.2. So I just try to highlight some areas where candidates are shining, and then some other areas where candidates have some areas for growth. So I'll go credential by credential here, so we can just talk about the single subject. The two that are circled here in the red boxes, we see that rubrics 1.3 and 1.4 were the two lowest performing rubrics. So it may be that the candidates in single subject could use a little bit more support in understanding 1.3 and 1.4 relative to step 1 plan. Then next, if we look across world language, we see that all the world language mean rubric scores are a 3 or above, which is excellent. And really the lowest is a 3.3, which far exceeds that at least a 3 expectation. So world language is doing great here across the board with some particular strength in reflection in rubric 1.7. Then if we look at our multiple subject, candidates appear to need support in rubrics 1.2, 3, and 4, as evidenced by this 2.5, 2.4, and 2.4, as well as rubrics 1.7 and 1.8. So we see that 2.5 and 2.3. So those are some areas for growth and development. Julie and the team will be giving a little bit more context around these scores, noting specifically what candidates can be working on and how you can support your candidates. And then I would also note that we did not see any 3s across multiple subject. So that's effectively they're not hitting that target performance. We would like to see that at least across multiple rubrics. So there's definitely some areas that they can improve in. And even though their highest rubric scores, these 2.8s, they're still not hitting that 3 target performance level. So more to come on context for multiple subject. And then PK3, basically the PK3 candidates generally appear to need support with the rubrics 1.7 and 1.8. So you see that 2.1 and 2.6. So this was an area that they definitely had some challenges with. But I want to note, just buyer beware here, that the in count here is only 15. So when we're talking about averages or the means of these rubric scores, one or a couple candidates can artificially drop the scores down a little bit. So I like to actually go back and dig into the data and just see where there may be some of the candidates that didn't do so hot on this one, but it was only a couple candidates versus across the board of all 15. But as we get more data, we'll have a lot more clear picture of what we're seeing specifically for PK3 in the version 1 NPA. So highlighting some of the bright spots that we saw there, again, within the new versions, that version 1, the pass rates being 98% or above for all the credentials. Awesome news. We're very happy to see that. We're seeing strong mean rubric scores observed for rubrics 1.1, 1.2, and 1.5 for single subject world language in PK3. And again, noting that all of the world language rubric mean scores were 3.3 or above. All right. And Julie, I'll turn it back over to you to talk about some of these areas for growth.
Okay, thanks, Xavier. So, kind of let that data sink in a little bit. As we went through and looked at that rubric mean score table, we sort of extracted that for single subject and multiple subject, there seemed to be lower rubric scores for 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. And those are the three focus student rubrics. So we're going to dive into that in just a minute. And then for multiple subjects, and again, PK3, it's only an N of 15, so keep that with, take that with a grain of salt. Just lower rubric scores for 1.7 reflect and 1.8 apply. So we want to kind of talk about these two in the next two slides. Let's start off for single subject and multiple subjects looking at the focus students on the next slide. And Susie, I do see your question in the chat. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. So again, let's talk about those three focus students and how candidates are differentiating their instruction. They are selecting that very specific focus student and making those instructional adaptations to best support them in the classroom. It's not a one size fits all. These are very specific needs and things that we're asking for the candidate to look for in that student and think about, based on what they know and their recent available information to them, how they're going to plan those adaptations. So focus student 1 is rubric 1.2. Focus student 2 is rubric 1.3, and focus student 3 is 1.4. So 3 rubrics are dedicated to really how the candidate is differentiating their instruction. So that's really a key point to think about, to pass along to faculty that are supporting candidates with the CalTPA. Because again, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a cut and paste. These adaptations will fit all 3 focus students. No, we're asking for very specific things. So for focus student 1, this would be that student who needs support with their academic language development, not English language development per se, and not a designated ELD. This is academic language development. So what is the language needed to understand and access the math cycle instruction or the content-specific instruction that is in cycle 1? So it's very open that the candidate, can use this information to select that student that might need that extra support with their ALD. In focus student 2, they're selecting a student who needs that additional support in meeting the math content and practice or the content specific standards. So again, looking for that student who is not quite meeting those state standards. They need more support either in math, if they're doing the math cycle, or in the content specific area for single subject and world language. And finally, focus student 3, this is that student that needs support with their well-being and or their behavior. It doesn't have to be both. It could be one or the other. Maybe they're having something's going on at home and they're having some they need more social emotional support in the classroom, or maybe they've just got a behavioral issue that the new candidate is struggling with, and how to support them and how to get them to engage in the math or the content. So again, these are very flexible areas for the 3 focus students. And going back to focus student 1, they're planning those language adaptations for that specific focus student. So that's their ALD. So what would those language adaptations be? Focus student 2, they're thinking through those academic content adaptations. And again, notice we write adaptation or adaptations. It could be just one adaptation or it could be multiple. Again, this is flexibility for the candidate. And finally, for focus student 3, this is they're creating those environmental adaptations or adaptation. So they're thinking through, how can I work this environment to better support Focus Student 3. So FS1, I saw the chat. FS1 is Focus Student 1. So we just abbreviate FS for Focus Student. And so across all three of those focus students, just reminding your candidates based on what you know about this specific focus student, their assets, their interests, their needs, how will you use this information to better support them in accessing, understanding that content of the lesson, whether it's math for MPA or content for single subject and world language. So again, just as a reminder, I think that third bullet down is really helpful. Think of it in terms of language adaptations, academic content adaptations, and finally, environmental. Let me look at the chat real quick. And that is the language of instruction for math, correct? Yes, if your candidates are doing the math cycle, the MPA, the math performance assessment, yes, the language for math. You have several candidates in lower grades in dual language, English and Spanish context where math is taught in Spanish. Yes, and that's fine for a bilingual, for a candidate that's in a what is biliteracy, bilingual
Dual language.
setting, dual language setting. Thank you. I'm like, why am I saying biliteracy? Dual language setting. Yes. So they can think through what is that academic language needed so that to better support them with that accessing that math understanding, math content. All right. So we will move on to our next slide, which is focusing on reflect and apply. Again, this is a good reminder for all of us. I think that those rubric scores were strong, but this really could be stronger in these two areas. And here's some of our thoughts on the why. But again, we want to hear from you too. If you have direct experience working with candidates and programs around these final two steps, is it that maybe the prompts are not clear? Are candidates running out of steam towards the end and they just want to wrap up these last two sections quicker? Because on the MPA in cycle 1, reflect and apply are just one template each. So these are just two templates. But what we're seeing and what we think might be happening is that the prompts really ask the candidate to analyze versus just summarize. So again, going into the difference, we know what they've planned, we know how they've taught it, we've seen and read all of the previous information, but we want the candidate to really dissect that information and break it apart. What do they think? How can they really analyze and reflect on their teaching, their planning, their adaptations for their focus students, the how they were leveraging assets. There's so much to go back and think through for a candidate and really provide the why behind why they think that. That's really, really helpful for a candidate, and especially in an analysis. So they're going through and they're thinking through why, and that might be like, I planned it this way, but when I taught it, I realized that this was happening and this is why I think this happened. So those things are really, really helpful. And again, candidates have to be a little bit vulnerable when they're talking about maybe something that didn't work as they're looking at their analysis. I've never looked back on any lesson that I've taught and felt it was perfection and perfect. There's always something that I realized I should have maybe done differently, but I didn't know it until I went through it and I taught it. And then I realized, oh, I didn't explain this properly. So we didn't have a common understanding of this. So students were confused when we got to the math activity or something, whatever it is, just having your candidates get in that practice of analyzing their teaching, their planning, and then talking about that rationale, that why. As a helpful hint and reminder, embedding some of these reflect and apply prompts into your fieldwork observation form really might get candidates in the habit of after you come to them and you do that observation and then you sit down for that debrief, really going through those same prompts that are in the CalTPA, might be helpful to get them in the practice of that prior to doing the actual CalTPA so that they're in the habit of really thinking through, reflecting on evidence, asking them in those debrief sessions and getting them in the habit of that. So another thing to pay attention to is the and in the level 3 rubric. Level 3 is the target. Level 3 meets the TPE. So there is a lot of this and that in those rubric constructs, whereas a level 2 is an and or. So, to meet the level 3, they've got to have this and something else. So if they don't have clear evidence of both, then they might be moved down to the level 2. That might be why we're seeing so many level 2s. So something to really call out attention to for candidates so that they are hyper aware that they've got to hit all of those different items within the level 3 construct. Really pay attention to the ands. Those and ors we give it to you in the level 2 if you hit one and or the other, but you got to hit both for level 3. And then finally, the referencing back to evidence from previous steps. So you'll notice that in step 3, where they reflect, and in step 4, apply, in both of those templates, they have to refer back to clear evidence from either their planning or their teaching, or if they're in the apply stage, their reflection, one of those areas, one of those previous steps. Now, assessors have been trained and told that if they can infer it, they can credit it, but it's not always clear. It is more clear to say, for a candidate to say, in my step 1 planning, I did da 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 da, but I didn't factor in whatever. That is very specific and clear, and we're looking for clear. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So clarity there when they are referencing appropriate steps. So if they're referencing a video, we get it. They're referencing step 2. If they're referencing maybe something, an adaptation that they planned for, we get it. We can infer that and give them credit. But again, just telling you the field that it is so much more helpful if candidates are super clear and they just almost use that construct like a sentence starter. So referring back to, my step 2 when I taught this lesson, and then they go into detail about that. That is definitely more helpful. So I hope that that is helpful. And I think we're now going to move into some LPA and cycle 2 data.
Thank you, Julie. So now taking a look at our LPA cycle 2 data, again calling out that this is data from August 1st of 25 through December 11th of 25. So similar to what we saw with the MPA data, we did a similar structure here. So first we'll take a look at the number of submissions. So similarly, we see fewer submissions for that version 7, or as we kind of noted, the old version. So still getting some submissions in here, but tapering off, and then seeing our in counts for the version 1 literacy or the new version 1 here. So getting a good number of submissions in now, and it's helpful for us to start to take a look at the data. So looking specifically at CalTPA LPA Cycle 2. This will again be the first attempt pass rates. And again, we see basically 98% to 100% of candidates across all their credential areas are passing on their first attempt. So again, kudos. Excellent to see this, and just happy that this is working out well for candidates. And we again appreciate all the support that was provided from the field and feedback as we did focus groups and surveys and all the things that you did to provide us with more information that all went into producing better, stronger, just overall better product in terms of the LPA and MPA. And I again think that that is reflected in what we're seeing with these pass rates. So next, we'll take a look at the rubric mean scores for LPA Cycle 2. So mean scores here. So again, noting you'll see the highest and the lowest noted for each credential with either a green or a red. box here, and the starting kind of overall holistic, we see the candidates perform best on rubrics 2.1, 2.2, and rubrics 2.7 to 2.8. So I noted kind of all without the exception of, we do see a couple, I'll say use the word generally because of PK3 not being as high here, but we see a lot of the green and again, really close to 3, above 3s here, a 3.1 and a 4.3. So seeing strong performance there. And then we see a nice cluster of 3 and above, even in world language here, hitting a 4 on average, 3.9. So strong performance in 2.7, 2.8, single subject, getting pretty close to the 3 there. But it seems just kind of from bird's eye view that we're seeing strength on rubric 2.1 and 2.2, and then as well as 2.7 and 2.8. So similar to what we did in the previous data slides, I'll just go credential by credential here. So we see that the single subject candidates, they may need some support with that rubric 2.6. So that was the only one. That's their lowest rubric. So it's a 2.7. It's getting close towards that 3. So I think with some more data, we might see that inch up a little bit closer, but otherwise we see a lot of 2.9s to 2.8, so getting very close to the 3. So just one area that we might want to keep an eye on for single subject is that rubric 2.6. All of the world language rubric mean scores were at least a 3.4 or above. Highest being this 4.3. They really knocked it out of the park on 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. I mean, really across the board. So whatever you're doing in world language, keep it up. They're doing very well, and it's reflected in the data here. So we've got an end count at 21 as we see that end count increase as we get more data. Hopefully these trends continue, but generally we have seen strong performance in world language. Next, looking at the multiple subject, we see that candidates may need some support for the rubric 2.6 here, as it's at a 2.8, so it's getting close to that 3. But we would like to see 3s across the board here, but relative to the MPA, remember before when we look at a multiple subject, there were no 3s. We're seeing 3s basically generally across the board, except for 2 rubrics. And even this one is very, very close to the 3, and the 2.8, not too far off as well. So we may see that both of these trend upwards towards the 3s as we get more data for multiple subject. And then lastly, for PK3, we see the PK3 candidates generally appear to need a little bit of support on these rubrics 2.2 through 2.6. So Julie can get into a little bit more of what we were seeing here. Definitely don't want to be seeing that 2 and then the 2.3, a 4, a 5. Again, less concerning when it's 2.8, 2.9, because it might just be sort of a matter of we're using the mean, and there we look at the standard deviation that it might actually be a little bit closer to 3 than it appears. But when they're getting lower like this, it's definitely something that we want to take a look at. But having said that, I will also just caution that that's only looking at the 8 submissions that we have currently. So as I mentioned before with PK3, it might be that there are 1 or more candidates that didn't do so well, and it's actually dragging down these numbers because again, it's showing the average, not looking at the individual submissions and scores. So that's something actually I'm going to go back and look at for my own homework, is to be able to answer this question of, is this actually systematic across at least the 8 that we had, or was it just 1 or 2 candidates that might have pulled these numbers down a little bit. So as we get more submissions in, we'll be keeping an eye on this, and I hope to be able to report out something a little bit more positive as we get some more numbers in here, because we know the PK3 candidates can do well. Just wanted to share the information that we do have, and then note that caveat of we're really only talking about 8 candidates. So just want to be very cautionary in how we interpret this data, but wanted to make sure again that we could show you something today. So if we're highlighting some of the bright spots here,
Sure.
again, we got the pass rates 98% or above across all credentials. Kudos. The strong rubric mean scores generally being observed for rubrics 2.1 and 2.2, so those planned rubrics, and then reflect and apply in rubrics 2.7 and 2.8. And again, noting that world language rubric mean scores are 3.4 or above, so just really, really strong performance there. Right, and I will turn it over to Julie unless there are any questions.
I'll take it from here. Thank you, Xavier. Okay, so thank you for that really strong data review, and it's so wonderful to see that there are so many candidates that are doing well on this, and thank you for your hard work, dedication. We know it was a very trying start to the academic year, but in looking at these data, I'm happy to see what we have going forward. But looking at some areas for growth, taking a look at that essential question is how does the candidate use assessment results to provide specific actionable feedback to students related to literacy, about what they did well and or misconceptions, gaps in knowledge, right? So it's not necessarily literacy for your single subject folks, so it's the content specific, but so taking a look at literacy or content and language development. And the word and often can be a challenge because if a candidate does a really great job giving specific actionable feedback about something to do with the content but not necessarily something to do with the language development, then that would cause the candidate to score a lower than a 3 on that rubric. And so really attending to those ands is an important part of the guiding of a candidate through this performance assessment. And also understanding what specific actionable feedback means. Um, Sometimes we think that a candidate understands something and they all nod their heads when you say something, but actually asking them to provide specific actionable feedback, oftentimes folks will just say, "Great job," or "You really met the target there." And the student that they are working with might not necessarily understand where they're getting, that feedback, and also recognizing that feedback can be identifying spaces for growth, but also identifying spaces where the students are doing well. And so just understanding that feedback is just them providing something to their students that is going to help them move forward. So sometimes it's, that specific actionable feedback that reinforces something that they've done, or it's specific actionable feedback to address a misconception or a gap in knowledge. And just making sure that it's clear for the student and that it also must include that literacy or content specific as well as that English language development. Now, in cycle 2, previously, it was an option to house ELD in that space. It is no longer an option because it has been pulled out of what was cycle 1, now is cycle 1 MPA. It's now academic language there and English language development here. So that's just another shift that that folks are pushing through, that whether or not the candidate has a student who is an English language learner in their classroom, they need to plan for English language development. And they must provide that specific actionable feedback around the content and language. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Kick it over to Julie to talk about some condition codes.
Yeah, I was just looking through the chat, making sure we got to everything. And I see how thrilled the field is about having the same passing standard for next year. I think we should have led with that, Marissa.
Yeah,
We
and it was funny.
started off with it's going to
Well,
be 16 and 14.
Well, the big thing is we did not have confirmation on a lot of that until after the
Right.
December commission meeting. Originally, the standard setting was scheduled for this spring, but we've pushed
Right.
the standard setting till next spring, and the commission decided to continue the same passing standard
Yeah.
as we go into version 2. And that's why feedback from the field will be so key as we push forward and make sure that we are asking candidates to do something that's authentic to their practice, that truly is a demonstration of them, authentic demonstration of themselves as a teacher.
Yes.
And the question about submission examples, they are
Yeah.
absolutely in process. We are hoping to get them released very, very soon.
Yes. We have been actively working on that. So we will share that out with all of you, the program coordinators. We'll send it out via our listserv. We'll put it in the EQ branch. All the ways that we, sort of share out information like this with the field. It won't just be suddenly added quietly to the website. We will announce it. Okay, great questions. Did I miss anything? Oh, did you see Asia's comment, Marissa, about candidates in lower grades before we move on?
So the rubric that we were addressing when we were taking a look, the two pieces of evidence are video and commentary, right? So there is specific actionable feedback that's in step 3 as well, and that is there's different ways that a candidate can provide that specific actionable rubric specific feedback. They can orally record the student, but that might be another space where it's a challenge for folks too, because it has to be in real time, captured in video, and then described in commentary. And so perhaps with younger children sitting at a kidney table working with a small group, the candidate could be talking about some specific foundational reading skill that they're teaching, and the student says exactly what they want, and they say, wow, that's exactly the way to pronounce that word, and you are really understanding that we're focusing on the ah sound today. Great job, right? There's some specific actionable feedback. And then when they go to commentary at minute 1.3 in video clip 2, I pointed out to the student. And so that's where that specific actionable feedback is in a video. Whereas when they get to that step 3, that might be in writing. That might be something that they, or, yeah. So thank you for that.
A few more questions. What's the cycle 2 passing standard for world language and single subject? It's also passing standard of 16 points with a 14-point secondary passing. So that is for all the version 1s this year. They are
everyone, single
points.
subject, multiple
World
subject, education specialist, makes it easy to keep it straight. 16,
Yeah.
14. Because and cycle 1, cycle 2, MPA, LPA,
Okay.
everyone has
All
an
16, 14.
rubric performance assessment.
Yeah. Any other questions about the data before we move into condition codes? Because I don't want to move too quickly into this next section. If you have any questions about this fall data. What do you mean by 16? What do we mean by 16, 14? So the passing standard is a total of 16 points or higher. So that's what we mean by 16 points. As long as all 8 rubrics total up to 16 points, that is the passing standard. Candidates can get more than one score of a 1 on these version 1 assessments, and that will be the same for next year. So as long as the rubrics all total up to 16 or higher, they pass. The 14 is a secondary passing standard. That means that they're within those 2 points of meeting the passing standard of 16. And so if they receive a 14 or a 15 on any of the version 1 CalTPAs or EdSped CalTPAs, then it becomes a programmatic level decision. And that means that the program would then look at coursework, observation, and look at if the candidate has met and how they've met all the TPEs to see if they then want to recommend them for the secondary passing. Now, we do have a slide that's coming up here in like 5 more slides if you want to hold off, because Marissa loves to go into detail about secondary passing. Do we see this changing, the 16, 14? It will depend. As mentioned, we'll have next spring, we'll have a standard setting study, and we will look at all of the data from version 1 and the data that we have at that point for version 2. And then we will take those recommendations to the commission, and the commissioners will vote and decide on the passing standard for that specific credential area. So we will see. It's hard to say, but for this year and for all of next year, for version 1 and next year version 2, 16 is the passing standard. A 14 or a 15 moves into the secondary passing standard. That's the program level decision. And anything below 14, if they scored a 13, they would have to remediate and resubmit. So hopefully that comes as good news. And actually, in knowing that you have so many questions about secondary passing and the passing standard for this year and next year, helps Marissa and I and the team and Patricia to understand that this is something that we really need to emphasize to the field and get this information out. So please, as the program coordinator, pass this information along to your faculty, to your team, everyone that supports a candidate with the CalTPA. This is very good information. Let the candidates know the passing standard. Okay, I think we're good to move on. But again, if you have questions, I mean, now's the time. We're here for you. All right, let's move into condition codes. And for many of you that have been doing this work for years, this might make the hair stand up on the back of your neck because you might have some trauma with condition codes. But we actually are sharing out some really good news on version 1, the 25-26 version. So let's talk about what condition codes look like for version 1. Only technical related condition codes remain. Again, only technical issues. And what would technical be? That would be if audio cannot be heard, a video cannot be opened or cannot be played or cannot be heard. They uploaded an incorrect document or they upload the same document twice, which means one template was left out. So that doesn't give us a complete submission. So those sort of things are those technical related codes. We don't have a complete submission. If we can't hear the audio, we can't score it. If we're missing a template, it's not a complete submission. We can't score it. So all content related codes that have been eliminated, those were in the past. Those were version 7, version 3, and other prior versions. So those no longer remain. Those have been eliminated. And so any of those content, what used to be content related codes, those are now you'll see in the rubrics. You might notice that if you look at level 1, something is lacking, and so a candidate might score level 1 for a rubric. So instead, it is still scoreable. We can score it. They might not score well on it. They might get a level 1. So if you see that a candidate, for example, gets a level 1 on a rubric, then that means something is lacking. It's not there. There's no evidence of it found. So that might be, it might be that they didn't use grade level standards. It might be that they, did not leverage student assets or have any mention of that. So just so you understand that technical codes remain, content related codes have been now embedded into rubrics, so it's scoreable. So for 25-26, for version 1, these revised rubrics these allow the assessors to really evaluate and score rather than we return them back to the candidate for any content issues. And we do have a link to the CalTPA submission requirements and condition code. So you can bookmark that on the website. And if your candidate gets a certain condition code, you can look at that and read up about it and figure out why. And we also get a lot of questions in our CalTPA inbox about the candidate uploaded every single template and they don't know why, something was condition coded. So you can always reach out to us. And then we reach out to evaluation systems and we find out what might have been that technical issue. So we are, again, here to support you because we know you are supporting so many candidates in the field, but it is good for you, the program coordinator, to know and be up to date on what those codes are and remind candidates about the importance of uploading the right template so that they don't upload something twice or upload a draft or upload something that's blank. Because sometimes we'll see a template that gets uploaded that's clearly a draft version. It's part of the program. The program has sentence starters added. It says on there, return to your professor by this date for review. And so the candidate did not finalize and use a final version of that template. So anyway, just as a reminder to walk through candidates, what condition codes are and how they're used, and to be very careful with technical issues because we want a complete submission. We want to be able to score it. We don't want to have to return it. Okay, and let's get into what we're seeing for our high frequency codes. So Xavier put this together. This is really helpful. This is a combination of the fall high frequency codes from version 7 and version 1. So it's a little bit of a mix. There weren't the super high numbers in version 7 like there were in version 1. And this is a mix of MPA, LPA, cycle 1, cycle 2 data. So this is a hodgepodge of the one melting pot here. So let's look at version 7, the old version that is definitely the numbers are tapering down. But the high frequency code there was at A9. There were 17 submissions where they did not have their ELD learning goals were not identified. That was an old condition code. It's still applicable only for version 7. So if you still have a candidate that's submitting in the old version, they might still receive that condition code. It's no longer applicable for the new version. And then for a D8 condition code, there were 10 submissions where they did not have 3 to 5 lessons provided. So good to know for the old, but let's look at the new version 1. There were 12 candidates who still submitted and received an A2 condition code. And that's when the submission corresponds to a different content or credential area other than for which the candidate registered. So again, in the registration process, somewhere the candidate might be, for example, a mild moderate credential seeker, but somehow they registered for the multiple subjects or vice versa, or they are a single subject candidate and they accidentally in the drop down selected agriculture instead of art. It was part of the drop down. So it's really, candidates need to carefully go through the registration process. We don't like to see these codes at all because we want them registering because when they register for a certain credential area, it goes into a queue when they submit. So it gets submitted into a queue. So if they registered for agriculture, but they're submitting for art, it goes to an agriculture assessor and they open it and they look at the contextual information. They're like, wait, this is an art teacher. This is art. This is an art submission. This is in the wrong area. And so then we have to undo that and kick it back. So some ways to prevent this. Um, a group registration process. We know that a lot of programs have a time and they build a time into coursework where they can walk their candidates through the registration process and make sure that they're registering for the right credential area. It's especially confusing this year because if they were eligible for the old version 7, then all of the old version 7 assessments are going to come up, and then the new version 1s are going to come up too. It's also a little confusing because when you look at the registration page, literacy performance assessment that we call LPA, and then math cycle, it's in that order, literacy and then math because the system alphabetizes it. So it doesn't come up as math first and then literacy second. So these are all things to just be aware of, walk your candidates through. If they do register on their own, perhaps ask them to send you a screenshot or send it to your credential analyst or someone who can verify that they've registered for the right area, that it's not going to be coded, kicked back, and then they'd have to wait till the next submission window to resubmit. Because we know time is precious and they're waiting on their preliminaries. So anything that you can do or have helpful tips and suggestions around this area to lessen those A2 codings, we are all ears. I don't know if anybody, I haven't looked at the chat. Let me look at the chat. If anybody has any ideas or wants to raise their hand about ways that they are helping their candidates register for the right area. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move on, but if you have tips and tricks, please put it in the chat because this is the group. Yes, Deborah, thank you. Some people, yeah, that shared that they register as a group synchronously. Yes, that's a great, absolutely great way to prevent that because I would imagine you, the faculty, you're walking around and making sure and verifying before they hit that submit button and pay. So that's great. I know that for the pilot and the field test, a lot of programs that were in those field tests did a group submission process. Stephen, thank you. You created slides that walked them through the process. Great screenshots, like with arrows. Like this is what you're registering for. And Asia, that you created a guide document. Thank you. But need to update it with the new screenshots. Yeah, that's true. Um, and extra work, but this is actually like really good work to do for your candidates because it perhaps, it's their first time. It's not intuitive on which one, and there's so many choices on which one to register for. So those are really great. This next slide talks about we have linked for CalTPA, EdSped, and CalAPA the submission requirements and the codes. So this is helpful link for you to share it with your candidates. And when you hit those links above, it takes you to the resources. What are the requirements to submit? This is really helpful for file formats and things like that. What are the condition codes? Why might my submission be returned? They should know that ahead of time. And then steps for you and the candidate. What do they do after they receive a condition code? We get lots of emails from candidates and they're like, I received this condition code, and they send us the score report. And we just advise them to talk to the program. Talk to your program, let them know, and work with them to remediate the work. So. And then I saw a question in the chat. If they adapt a kinder standard for TK and explain how they did that, is that okay? Some sites don't use the TK foundational standard docs, so candidates feel like they need to go with what their cooperating teacher is using.
I just put in the chat
Oh,
there is a little asterisk star underneath the rubric that says you must use the California Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts Literacy, and then if you're in a TK, they must use preschool transitional kindergarten learning foundations. So I mean, there's always that push and pull between what programs require, what the state requires, what a site requires, but it is defined in the rubric in the LPA that if the candidate states that they're in a TK setting, the assessors are going to be looking for a PTKLF standard or
yes.
strand that they are going to be citing.
And for the math cycle and cycle one, if the candidate is in a TK setting and they put a kinder standard, it would be a level one. They must use for any TK setting, they must use the preschool transitional kindergarten learning foundations.
And that must is new because PTKLF was not available at the published time for version 7 of the multiple subjects performance assessment last year. And so what the PTKLF came out after, and then we had to like say, okay, they can use this or this. But now that it's available, published, and so it's a must now.
It's a must. It's a must now. Also, there was confusion about candidates that might be in a TK setting, but the program is only authorized for a multiple subjects credential. And so there was confusion around that area. It
Multiple
doesn't
subject,
matter.
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the credential area that you're authorized to use. You don't have to be authorized for PK3 credential. If a candidate, just blanket statement, if a candidate is in a TK setting, they must use the PTKLF. Kinder and above use the Common Core.
Yeah, and multiple subject credentials are authorized to teach in a TK setting. You don't have to have the you don't have to have the PK3 credential to teach in TK. It's
Right.
just there's different pathways. So a multiple subject credential holder who holds the requisite number of ECE units can teach in a TK setting. And so that PK3 credential and the multiple subject credential are overlapping. And so that's why much of what is expected from those two credentials is very similar. It's just if a candidate is in one setting or in another, they need to complete their performance assessment with the required standards. So if they're in a PK3 setting and they do one version, one TK, they do the TK for their math performance assessment, and then they're in their second setting, maybe in a second grade classroom, then they would do the Common Core State Standards for their LPA, right? Because they're not in TK in both of those settings. So it's important that the candidate, and those are both authorized in their credential span of grades. So.
Right. And if unsure, as you're helping and supporting your candidates, in the assessment guide, the very first section, right after the at a glance table, we go into depth about navigating the state strands and standards. So TK all the way through grade 12 or all the way through age 22, we go into depth about and link to the state standards that the candidate should be accessing depending on their clinical placement.
Right. And I just want to make it clear, they don't do a TPA based on the setting they're in. They do the TPA based on the credential they're seeking. So if they're seeking a multiple subjects credential, they could be in a fifth grade class, they could be in a TK class, they could be in a self-contained eighth grade class in a little tiny district that has 70 kids, and so all the eighth graders get all their instruction from one teacher. They could be in any one of those settings, and they would do the multiple subject performance assessment because that matches the credential they're seeking. If they're in a PK3 program, then they would do the PK3 the teacher performance assessment. So the performance assessment needs to match the credential they're seeking. It's not they're a multiple subject candidate in a TK classroom, so they do the PK3 version. No, they do the multiple subjects version because they're seeking a multiple subjects credential. They do the PK3 version because they're seeking a PK3 credential. So a PK3 person who's in a second grade classroom would not complete the multiple subjects version. They would just cite standards from the Common Core State Standards that align with second grade.
Yes.
I know it's challenging when things are overlapping in that way, and folks think, oh, I'm in a PK3 setting, so I should do this PK3 version, but it doesn't align with the credential they're seeking.
Not if it's not the credential you're seeking. So the credential first. So that comes back to the registration process so that the candidate's clear. I'm seeking a multiple subjects credential. I'm registering for the multiple subjects. I'm going to start with the math cycle, if that's what your program is telling you to do. And that's the one you're going to register for. And then they get their assessment guide. And within that guide, we do go into depth about how to navigate these state standards and strands. So I hope that that's helpful to the field. Lori,
clear as overlapping credentials can be.
Clear as mud, clearer.
Absolutely.
Lori's got a question in the chat about any word on the Asian language supports and options related to ELA and bilingual settings. Marissa,
is this
do you
for
have any
cycle
updates?
for the LPA?
I believe this is for LPA.
I'm sorry for jumping in and asking the question,
please.
but I know I'm sort of joking when I say I'm going to die on this hill. I think because I bring it up a lot. But I did want to confirm that anything that mentions ELA, if they are in a bilingual Spanish setting, that the SLA that they or SLD, or sorry, I'm using the wrong language right now, and that's terrible. But that they can use the Spanish, especially for anybody who hasn't faced that already. But then we do have the variety of Asian language who are, as much as 90-10 in those environments. And it's really, it's hard. I'm just going to say it. It's hard.
No, absolutely. And I know that Juliet Waltleitner has been working with the community to come up with an answer. And I'm not sure if she's pushed out any type of response, but at this time, the candidates seeking to complete the LPA must either do so in English or in Spanish. There is no supporting documents from the CDE because we have to wait for documents to come out from the CDE to be able to push out anything for the literacy performance assessment in a language other than one that has documents already created.
I meant SLD. I didn't mean SLA. Sorry.
No, we know.
Typo.
Hey,
Hey, I just kind of typing with my nose sometimes, so I
The
have
D
to
and not the A,
understand.
but
Yeah,
okay,
no.
thank you. I just want to make sure we're still on that same path
yes,
at this moment because I get questions a lot. So
yeah.
Right. No, absolutely. And we have had, like I said, conversations with multiple folks in the field around this issue, and we are constrained by the legislation SB 488, which pushed these issues into sharp relief and showed some of these um concerns, and we are, again, we're waiting for CDE to come up with some other kinds of standards, and they have done so already for Spanish. They have not done so for any other language, and so we have the ability to do these in Spanish but not any other language at this time. And again, that's above us for our decision making power. That's Juliet Waltliner that's been working on that, and we'll check in and see where she is on the communication for the resolution to this issue, going forward into the spring, and hopefully we can move forward in a way that is equitable to all candidates.
thank you.
Yes. And I do see in the chat about putting out an official statement on what we just shared about completing the TPA related to the credential on the coordinator page. So I do think that's a good idea. So yeah, we can work on something like that so that you can share that with your candidates about the credential that they're seeking, is the assessment that they're registering for, and then supporting them in the clinical placement that they're in so that they are selecting the correct state standards or strands, depending on PTKLF or Common Core. And then there's another question around LPA for multiple subjects.
Yeah, so I'm reading the LPA for multiple subjects, ask candidates to choose a foundational reading skill. Do they need to pick a reading skill standard for foundational reading skills on pages 17 through 19 of the Common Core? I believe that it's also listed right on the rubric of what foundational reading skills. So if you take a look at rubric 2.2, and I will just go ahead and copy and paste this text into the chat. So the foundational reading skills, print concepts, including letters of the alphabet, phonological awareness, and such. Does that answer that question? I believe it's up in the guide as well, but because I'm me, I typically look at that spot in the rubric because it's just a nice bullet. I was wondering if they would need to choose a standard. So for each learning segment, they would provide the grade level ELA literacy strand and standard, and then they would provide a developmentally appropriate ELA literacy learning goal. And then they would provide an ELD strand or standard that amplifies the selected ELA. So that I'm looking on the multiple subjects, page 11 of the guide, where it talks about what they would provide in each learning segment. Is that the question? I just want to make sure. Okay, we can always stay online after.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All right. We'll
Let's go ahead
think
and go to
about
the
it.
next slide. Okay, passing standards. So we've already talked about this a little bit earlier, and like I said, the 16 passing standard that can be achieved in any combination of scores. A candidate can get a 5 on one rubric and a 1 on another rubric, and as long as the rest of them add up to 10, then they would meet that 16. As you saw in the data, candidates are exceeding that 16-point score, but the minimum passing score is 16. And then the secondary passing standard is set at 14. And this is for all CalTPA version 1, so single subject, world language, multiple subjects, PK3. There is also some data in there around the passing standards and secondary passing standards for EdTPA. If you are interested in any of that information, they have a different scoring system, but there's 8 rubrics for cycle 1, MPA, 8 rubrics for cycle 2, LPA. And so it's if a candidate scores a 2 all the way through, they would meet that passing standard. And that was intended to be very supportive, as these are new performance assessments. And the faculty, as well as the candidates, are moving and learning together as we go on this journey of performance assessment. And again, that's a lot of the information that we are gaining from this this academic year will be used to develop those changes, updates, clarifications for version 2. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. So the secondary passing standard, this was adopted in 2023, but for those of you that are new to the performance assessment world, the goal is for a program to be able to look at their individual candidate who scores within that secondary passing standard. And depending upon what version of the performance assessment they took, because there is still version 7 out there for some candidates, you need to pay attention. If they took a version 7, there's a different secondary passing standard than 1614 because there are different passing standards for version 7 of the single subject and world language and multiple subject. But the goal was to allow for programs to recommend for a preliminary credential candidates who have met the teacher performance expectation in a different way. So they may not have met it on this performance assessment, but they may have met it in coursework. They may have met it in clinical practice. They may have met it in both places. They just didn't shine as much on this performance assessment. And you as a program can be able to gather some documentation of the candidates passing that teacher performance expectation, having met that teacher performance expectation, and use that data to include in their candidate file, fill out the form, and use that standard. Now, we get questions from candidates often about, well, I met this very secondary passing standard and my program's going to recommend me. When will my score report be updated? And it won't. They will not get an updated score report saying that they met the expectation via the secondary passing standard. They will only get a score report that documents whether they've passed or not. But they will have that individual breakdown in that score report that will say how many points they achieved. And that is what you can use to be able to recommend them via the secondary passing standard. Now, I know that the documents to update candidates via the secondary passing standard are either in the process of or are going to be updated to align with the new adopted passing standards. If you have a candidate and the document has not been updated, please use what is in place now to be able to move forward, so that way candidates can continue to move forward with their credential. Okay, so question in the chat, I've received questions from program coordinators about whether they're required to use. No, they are not required to use the secondary passing standard. If the candidate has not demonstrated that TPE, maybe it's a confirmation of something that you already had multiple conversations. Maybe the candidate, they did not meet the requirement for reflections and they are not actively reflecting. They say, every single lesson that is observed, they're like, this was perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing. I'm going to laminate this thing, put in a binder, and use it every single year from now on. That candidate is not actively reflecting, right? Excuse me. And so maybe this performance assessment confirms a conversation that you've already had and saying, it's not just me. There is an assessor out there who holds the same credential that you are seeking that shows that you are not meeting these rubric constructs. And we need to work on this before I can move you forward. So you're not required to do that. That's the power of knowing your candidates of working with your candidates over time and being able to make that judgment call. Now, the reason I go to that exact example is because the candidate that I did recommend for secondary passing, that's where the candidate was challenged on their teacher performance assessment. But I personally had been that candidate's mentor for 2 years and had observed them in the classroom 24 times over the course of 2 years and saw a very thoughtful practitioner who reflected on practice, asked for suggestions, and then the next time I came back, I saw those suggestions taken and continued to work that way. That candidate absolutely in her clinical practice throughout these observations had demonstrated that she was an active, reflective practitioner. And so I had plenty of evidence to be able to include in her recommendation. But again, not required. It's up to the program in the program's purview to be able to use the secondary passing standard. So the program is required to look at the secondary passing standard. The program is required to look and to use the secondary passing standard if appropriate. Making a blanket statement saying we don't use secondary passing here, that's not acceptable. It is acceptable to deny someone secondary passing standard because they don't have evidence of having met that teacher performance expectation elsewhere. But it is required that programs and candidates review the secondary passing standard. Any other questions about the passing standard or the secondary passing standard? We did have some questions earlier about the passing standards potentially being updated. We will be doing standard setting and be on the lookout for those because standard setting is conducted with experts in the field. We don't just sit, Julie and Patricia and I don't just sit around and say 22, that's what we should do. What is done is there are multiple submissions that are pulled and experts come into a room and say, beginning practitioners should be able to do this, this, and this to this level. And there's a really good conversation that happens over multiple days to be able to come to a decision about what a candidate should be able to do, what a beginning practitioner should score on a performance assessment. And that's why in the past, there were different passing standards depending upon what credential area a candidate was seeking. So that I believe like the passing standard for the ESN didn't have a side condition of having 2 1s because that group of experts believed that a candidate should be able to demonstrate competency in that way. So the passing standards will, like I said, they go through a process where we bring together experts, look at submissions, come up with a decision, and then that recommendation is made to the commission. And it's expected to be at their June 2027 meeting where they will adopt passing standards and secondary passing standards for the 27-28 academic year. But for this year and for next year, the passing standard is at 16 to pass, 14 for secondary. Any other questions? All right, I think we can go on to the next slide. Okay, version 2 update survey. Do we have links for that? And have we checked to make sure they're all good and working?
I did check. I put a Word document in the Google resource folder so that you can click on the CalTPA survey. I did check. It opened for me. So it doesn't hurt if one or two of you wants to click on it and just let us know if you're able to open it.
Could we potentially put the link in the chat?
Yeah, let me go grab it.
Perfect, thank you. So what we're doing right now is we're going through the process of making those iterative changes to the version 2 and changes are going to be iterative, and then there are some things that we have control over, and then other things that we don't. So if something is written specifically in SB 488, it needs to be in place. But things that we can adapt, change, update for version 2, we want to hear from you all as we are doing this work. And so hopefully you're able to access that link and share it with faculty at your institution. This is primarily for faculty to be able to give us some feedback as you've been working with candidates, seeing things that they need additional support. Oh,
Interesting.
so
So it looks like the survey link requires a sign in. All right, I know who to email about this, so let me work on that behind the scenes.
okay. All right. Well, that's why we wanted to make sure that that was all working. So that way, if it was in the EQ weekly, then we can make sure to update that. And then we'll send it out to folks who attended this meeting. We'll send it out an updated link. All right. So some faculty policies and resource web pages. Hopefully you have seen that we updated our CTC website to be able to more carefully house faculty policies, resources, office hours, Zoom links, and also to let you all know if you don't already know, we do hold candidate office hours on a weekly basis from 4:15 to 5 o'clock every Wednesday. You can push out that Zoom link to candidates if they do have any questions. We hold office hours on the first and third Friday of each month, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit in my slides, but all of those materials, Zoom links, and all of those documents are listed on our website. If we can go to the next slide. Okay. I'm looking at something here. Okay, apologies. Okay, so next slide, please. Some stuff to mark your calendar with. Our next coordinator meeting is going to be on Wednesday, June 10th at 2026 from 1 to 3 p.m. And that will be an opportunity for us to come together again and review data from the spring and look at trends over the full academic year. Go to the next slide. We do have some digging deeper webinars coming up. We'll be talking about equity-focused teaching and leadership. Again, these are designed for both CalTPA and CalAPA. And we are in April going to be talking about embedding the CalAPA and TPA. And every program does it just a little bit differently. And I love to hear about how different programs embed their performance assessments and support candidates as they work their way through. And some programs create a separate little mini seminar for it. Some embed it into certain classes that candidates take in a progression. It just depends on your institution. So we want to provide some opportunities to hear from some programs that have had great success and talk to you as you are planning for the fall and the spring. We can go to the next our YouTube channel where we post all of the videos from our webinars and digging deepers, and make sure you get to our commission page. There's a lot of different things on there, and because we do have our own playlists that are just specifically performance assessment. We can go to the next slide. Meredith Fellows Implementation Conference, MFIC. This typically has happened in the fall. We pushed it this year until the spring because it was version 1 and materials were not out yet. And so we wanted to make sure that we gave the field some time to come together and to share some best practices. And the link to register for the conference is in the chat. It is free to attend, fully online via Zoom, and there are going to be some dynamic presentations from programs talking about how they use data to leveraging data to improve practice. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Go ahead, and this is some contact information. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so the list that's in the Google folder, that is a list that we pull from a server that we do not control. If you were to email me and say, my name's not on here, can you please add me? No, I cannot. The only person that can update your ADS is the person who is designated to do so at your institution. So even if you email me and say, I'm not there, I can't, I've done this more than once. We can't do that. I don't control those pieces. None of us do here. The only person that can update ADS contact is the person that's designated at your institution. If you are unsure of who that person is, the annual data system at ctc.ca.gov, that is the email to send an email to, because those are the folks that manage the ADS system, and they will be able to support you in updating that ADS. We here pull that list to be able to have contacts. Now, some folks have emailed, I'm not getting these emails. I don't understand why. I'm the CalTPA coordinator. Please check the ADS list, because when sometimes you'll get emails from us and they come from the listserv, but then some of the emails will come from our partners, ES at Pearson, and they use the ADS link, the list, to be able to send out those emails. Okay, we can go to the next slide. These are those email lists that we will send out reminders and send out materials on, and anyone can subscribe to these. Again, you go to the links, they're on our website, or they're linked in this presentation, which will be in the Google folder after today's presentation, and you can sign up for this information yourself. Anyone can sign up from the institution, but they do sign themselves up for the faculty, for the email listservs. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Like I said, I jumped ahead. My apologies. Program office hours, first and third Fridays from 9 to 10. That is for faculty members to come and ask any kind of questions that they have. But candidate office hours every Wednesday from 4:15 to 5 p.m. That is a Zoom link where candidates have open time to be able to come and ask questions. And there are representatives at both of these office hours from ES of Pearson and from the CTC. So if you are having a technical issue, if you know of a candidate that's having a technical issue, they can come to office hours and ask those questions. We are going to be resuming our monthly leadership PLCs. We kind of took a little break over the winter because of a commission meeting, and again, another meeting in January that we didn't get to schedule our January PLC, but we will be coming together in February on the second Friday of the month from 11 to noon for our PLC. And if anybody has any topics they'd like us to cover in that one, you can drop them into the chat. We can try to see what would be a good space to come in and chat around, and potentially bring in any guest speakers like we did from the last one, where we were talking about technical supports for the performance assessment. And we can get to our last slide. Thank you for your attendance and participation today. You can contact us at CalTPA at ctc.ca.gov. Candidates can contact us at that email as well for technical support. So if a candidate has a specific question about, I don't know, anything to do with the strands and standards or anything like that, that's a CalTPA question. If it's I set up my registration and I no longer have access to that email address, but I need to register for this, that's an es-caltpa at pearson.com email question, because we at the CTC do not manage the candidates' portals or how they register, but we do manage, so we manage more of those questions that have to do with content, not necessarily the technical side. Our website, like I said, we updated our performance assessment website. There are some more clear links and Zoom links and schedules up there. And then the ES of Pearson website, the CTC exams website, has a lot of good information.
Thank you all. And I just wanted to mention that, yeah, the next office hours we have, this was brought up in the chat. Let me go to January.
Oh yeah.
And the first and third Fridays. So we had office hours last Friday, and then the first Friday in February is the MFIC conference. So we will not host on that date, but so the next date for office hours is February 20th. But again, you can email us at any of these. You can email us anytime with your questions. So please do reach out if there's anything. Don't wait until that time to get your questions answered. And I will go ahead and say thank you as well for being here and stop the recording. Give you a little bit of time back in your day, but we'll hang out here for a little bit as well if you've got some more questions. Also, again, the survey, we'll have to send you the link later on today. I don't know why it's not working, but I've emailed the person in charge, so we'll get that out to the field. Thanks.